reason we were filled with pride. Maybe we knew for sure that, I'm great at parties. Everybody really wants to come and talk to me, and so I'm obviously the guy that should be there. Based on my own opinion, I deserve that seat. I deserve to be in that place of honor. But the reality of the situation is we completely misunderstand the truth concerning who we actually are. And that's the first place that we can find ourselves in the midst of this feast as we're looking for the seat to take. That's the first place that we can find ourselves. But there's a second place that we can also find ourselves. And these two kind of can work together. The second place is that we completely misunderstand the truth of who the owner of the feast actually is. So first, we misunderstand who we are. Second, we actually misunderstand the owner of the feast and who they actually are. And to help this, to illustrate this, I have a story that's kind of near and dear to me because it's at our dinner table in my house, and that's a place I really enjoy being. Most days at home in the evening, we as a family all sit down and eat our meal. And I really enjoy that. It's something my father and mother did for us when we were kids, and I really enjoy the opportunity to sit down and do that. So generally, here's the rundown of what's happening, right? Kaylee will be in the kitchen preparing something. Maybe a few of the girls are helping her get stuff ready. And as the food gets near to completion, generally I'll say, okay, we need to get the table set. And sometimes that responds in 5 girls running and grabbing everything they can. Sometimes it's kind of like, I got more important things to do than set the table. But generally one at least will go and start setting the table. Now, there's a very niche thing for us, kind of in the position that we are in life, that each kid kind of is in different position of plate acceptability, right? We have like nice plates. We don't give those to Eleanor because she's going to throw it off the table and we really don't want it to get broken. So we have Eleanor plates that she can throw off the table all day long and they'll never break, kind of thing. And so the person who's setting the table actually has a little bit of power in their hand, because where they set the Eleanor plate is where Eleanor is going to end up sitting, and where they set their own plate is going to be where they end up sitting. And so they can strategically kind of position, and there's one place of honor that all the children always want to sit at. It's not next to Dad, surprisingly. It's actually next to Mom. You were probably not surprised by that, actually. So they want to sit next to Mom. Now, the trouble is there's only one seat next to Mom because Dad gets the other seat of honor next to Mom. And so there can be some jockeying for position. And so they go out, they get their plates, they set the table, they got it all set, they get to sit in this place of honor, and they're so happy about that. The trouble that arises is they forget who the owner of the feast actually is. Because they may have gone and set the table, and they may have set all the cards right in their favor so that when the deck is dealt, boom, they're going to be right there. But the reality is, based on perhaps previous behavior, or really at any time for any reason, the owner of the feast can say, no, you're not sitting there. That's actually for this child. And for this reason, or for this moment, the owner of the feast has the ability to place whatever child in that place of honor they desire to do. I think sometimes we forget that. That's kind of a funny story of me at my house and me being the owner of the feast, but the reality is that God is the owner of the feast, and sometimes we misunderstand or confuse the reality of His ability to place anyone in that seat of honor at any time that He so chooses. We forget the reality of who the owner of the feast is. We think, I helped set the table. I deserve that spot. I did this, and this. That's for me. That's just not the reality of the situation. We're too ignorant of who the God, the owner of the feast, actually is. And maybe what the owner of the feast actually desires from us. See, the parable finishes giving us the reality of what the owner of the feast actually desires. And we've talked about it a bit. It's that of humility, of a broken and contrite heart. He desires someone who's meek and humble. The parable ends, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. So if we misunderstand who we are at the feast, and we misunderstand who the owner of the feast actually is, then what do? How do we act at the feast? How do we respond, gain knowledge, know who this owner is, or know where we're supposed to actually be? Thankfully, the owner of the feast is the one who told the parable, and he's given some guidance to us on that. He's shown us the way in which we are to act, and we see that in verse 10. Jesus starts first with the way we shouldn't act, but then in verse 10 he flips and gives us the correct way, the way that we should actually act. The correct way of sizing up the situation, and this one is often very difficult for us. This one's a struggle. Jesus says, take the lowest place. When you go into the feast, you might deserve the top spot. That might be where you rightfully should be. Don't take that spot, though. Take the lowest place. Maybe it's the seat of the servant. Maybe it's the other end of the table, away from all the fancy guests, away from the nice chairs or the good food. Maybe it's cold by the time it's even served to you. But that's the place the owner of the feast is asking us to be. Maybe we think, well, if I knew the owner of the feast, why would he ever want me to sit in the lowest place? Why wouldn't he always want me sitting up there by him? Why would he ever put me in that position? The reality is, if that's the way you think, you don't truly know the owner of the feast. Because the parable doesn't stop with take the lowest place. It continues on and reveals the truth of the heart of those who take the lowest place. He says, take the lowest place first because it shows that you know the truth about who I am. You truly know the owner of the feast. But secondly, take the lowest place because I will gladly come grab you from there and bring you into your rightful spot. I will gladly exalt you in front of all of these before you, putting you in this seat of honor. We don't need to exalt ourselves. We can let the owner of the feast exalt us. But this action of sitting ourselves in the lowest spot is not done by nature. That's not our internals doesn't put us there. That's done because we know the owner of the feast and we understand what he desires of us. Paul, in one of his epistles, Philippians, he gives us insight into the owner of the feast. Actually, in all of his epistles, he gives us insight into who the owner of this feast actually is. But in one of them specifically, his heart cries out to knowing this God, knowing this owner. In the book of Philippians, he says this very simple yet powerful cry. And this should be the cry of our own hearts. The cry is we desire to know who this God is. He says in Philippians 3, chapter 10, this simple phrase, I want to know Christ. I want to know Christ. We live in a world that bombards us with all sorts of constant information. We talked about the internet earlier. You can go on the internet and learn anything from agriculture to zoology. It's all there. There's a professional in it who will gladly tell you everything you need to know to learn anything. But there's one thing that will explain to you how to act when you find yourself in the two places at the parable of the feast. There's one thing that will lead you to taking the lowest seat, and that is the knowledge of the owner of the feast. And if you desire to know the owner of the feast, you have to know Christ. You have to know Christ. As he has said, there's only one way to the Father, and it's through Jesus Christ. But I beg you, know the owner of the feast. Come to know him. Desire to be in relationship with him. Put yourself in the humble, lowly position that he may exalt you and lift you up. Worship team, would you come close?
So as we trust that Lord or owner of the feast, we can yield our lives to him, and he will guide us and direct us to the place that he chooses. Please stand with us and sing. It's in the Blue Book 389, Take My Life.
So as we go this week, really remember to thank your mother or those around you who have filled that role, as what a blessing it is that we have them. But put yourself in that lowest place. Allow the Lord to be the one who lifts you up. Don't exalt yourself above others, but let God put you in the place he desires for you. Go in peace.